Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Alexis and today I'm going to be sharing some of the books that I've read or plan to read by Asian authors, and this is in light of the video posted by With Cindy announcing the 2022 Asian Readathon. So if you don't already know, May is an Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, so it brings more awareness to the Asian community. And I myself identify as Black and Filipina. So one side of my family is Black American, and the other side of my family, Filipina American. So yes, I kind of understand, the immigrant background, first generation situation. So yeah, here we go. Before I get started with my own recommendations, I will be linking down below with Cindy's own video and her announcement talking about the different challenges, her own recommendations, and the inspiration behind this. I want to also admit that I primarily read romance, so most of my recommendations are going to be romance books that I've read or plan to read, so this should be interesting. Now, before I get started with my own recommendations, I will be listing down the challenges here that With Cindy mentions in her own video, again, linked down below. Her video also has another link in her description to Storygraph, which she used as a directory to list various subgenres or genres, ethnicities, tags that are included, and it makes it easier for other readers to find recommendations that are more in line with your taste. For me, I am primarily a romance reader, so that's mainly what I'm going to be sharing in this video, with maybe some YA here and there. So let's get started. The first trilogy I'll be sharing is by Helen Huang, and it is a contemporary romance. This is the Kiss Quotient trilogy. I did read these on Hoopla first using the audiobooks. Hoopla is another platform you may have access to audiobooks, ebooks, movies through your library depending on your location, but myself, I was able to access all three of them, and because I enjoyed them, I had to add them to my shelves. Now, each book does follow a neurodivergent character. In this case, it starts with Stella and Michael. Stella is on the autistic spectrum, and her family is kind of pushing her to get involved with someone so that they can expand their family. And Stella, because she is very invested in her work, she doesn't really converse with new people. She decides to hire Michael to educate her, and Michael as a male escort, and something else on the side, but you'll have to read to know what his own pursuits are. We get to see them develop their relationship. Michael, because he is an escort, he doesn't want to get involved with his clients, but of course that all changes when he meets Stella, and things don't even go for the full home run their first time meeting, so that's really interesting to witness in this story. I highly recommend this for contemporary romance. Excellent start to the trilogy. The next book in the series is The Bride Test, and this follows Kai and Esme. This story is a contemporary romance. It does feature an autistic hero this time. There's also close proximity. There is grief involved, all that in this story. And I will say that Kai's mother is the one this time who decides to go abroad and find him a bride and fly her back to America just to see if they can get along during the season, and if by the end they do find that they enjoy each other's company, they can get married. If not, she can just go back home, and it would just have been all a nice little adventure. So I did enjoy this because it does tap into grief and healing. It also addresses single parenting on Esme's end, immigrant life, and learning different ways to navigate society, whether it be by language learning or just building your education and associating yourself with people. So I thought this was a really interesting take on American life and immigrant American life. So there you go. The last book in the series is The Heart Principle, and this follows Quan and Anna. Now, Quan is mentioned in the other two books because of his relationships with Kai and Michael. That was very fun to see, but this takes place a few years later following a diagnosis and recovery. He is a survivor. That was fun to see. but he is just starting to get back into the dating scene, whereas Anna, she's already in a relationship with her boyfriend, but he decides to see other people. So Anna, taking him up on that, she joins an online dating app, and through that she meets Quan. They have a nice dorky patient relationship going on. It's also interesting to see that Anna comes to terms with her diagnosis, being on the spectrum, and having to, admit that to her family, despite their expectations for her and lack of understanding, having to push through that. There's also a level of grief in here. Some people might say this is more on the women's fiction side. Personally, I thought it was a healthy balance of, understanding for her, understanding for Quan, and going through that grief within her situation. But yes, this was my favorite book of the series. So if that doesn't convince you to read this, I don't know what else will. But all in all, I love the trilogy and I had to have it on my own shelf. So there you go. The next series I'll be talking about is the Twisted series by Anna Huang. These are independently published, so always support your independent authors. They do include, some triggers, so if you have any of those, definitely recommend looking into them. This is meant to have 4 books, but the final installment isn't scheduled to come out until June of this year. So I do recommend getting your hands on them before that release, so that way you can see what it's all about. I've heard this be compared to dark romances or mafia romances. I can't say have a lot of experience with those subgenres, so I'm not really sure myself. But from what I imagine, I guess you could say that these are, a hint of it. And each book does have their own various tropes, a group of friends, their own issues, and it does get thicker with each book. The most recent release that I have here is Twisted Hate, but before I get into that, I'm going to start at the beginning. The first book in the series is Twisted Love. This follows Alex and Ava. So Ava's brother is best friends with Alex, so there's best friends sibling trope in here. This is also a grumpy sunshine trope. On Alex's end, he does experience past trauma and he does have this ability to recall memories exactly and in detail, which is somewhat unfortunate but also a gift because he's able to enjoy the highs, but when he has lows, he has really low lows. So he is out for revenge and has been plotting for years, but Ava is the light in his life, and it's really interesting to see. I will say that this was a nice start for the series, but each book gets better and better in terms of the relationship dynamic and the things going on in the background. It's just really interesting. So yeah, but the first book, I do think you need to start here before going into the other books. Some people are okay with jumping around in the series, but I think in order to absorb the series as it was meant to be taken, you have to start at the beginning, and Twisted Love is where it's at. The next book in the series is Twisted Games. This follows Reese and Bridget. Bridget is due to become queen, and Reese is hired to be her bodyguard. This is forbidden. This is bodyguard romance, new adult. There's some mention of trauma in here as well. I will say a lot of people compare this to Princess Diaries 2 with Chris Pine and Anne Hathaway. I wholeheartedly agree. This is just that, but explicit. So definitely check into triggers for this as well if you have any. But other than that, I will say just dive right into this following Twisted Love because fairly enjoyable. This was better than the first, but not as good as the next one, which I will get into. The most recent release from the series is Twisted Hate. This follows Ava's best friend Jules and her older brother Josh. Josh was very protective of Ava, and after the events of Twisted Love, he kind of had a fallout with Alex. So we do get to see that and hear their bromance. But in addition to that, the expanded reasons as to why he and Jules hate each other. Jules is compared to Jessica Rabbit, so if you are familiar with her cartoon or not, I'm just going to place her image right here because if you don't know, I'm so sorry, but if you do, you know where I'm coming from. And they have their own history of playful banter and some benefit situation. But of course, they say, "Oh, I'm not going to fall for you, and this isn't going to get any further than here. This is all you're going to get." But of course, over time, they start to see each other for who they really are and not so much based on first impressions. We do also get to see some, cute dates in here that are book related. That's all I'm going to say. But it's just, and it's over 500 pages. This is one of very few books that I've read over 500 pages. And so for some people, that's, no issue. But for me, it is to maintain my interest that entire time. And I was tabbing through this baby. This is my favorite in the series. Definitely look forward to Twisted Lies again, which is scheduled to come out this June. And, if you want to appreciate some representation, get the male covers. It's just, this is my favorite book, and come on, we need that representation. But if not, the discrete covers are available if you prefer that. But again, I'm all here for men on covers. So another book would be Amali Howard's The Princess Stakes. This is a historical romance. It does feature an interracial romance with an Indian princess and the third son of a duke. I thought this was really interesting to read, considering it's not a plot that has been done before within historical romances. In fact, it's very rare for me to see someone of a mixed background or a different background in historical romances, so I had to pick this up. I will say there were some things I thought could have been written better, but some people still enjoyed it, and I'm not going to deny that. But this book follows Sarani and Ryston. Ryston, as the third son, didn't really have a purpose yet when he first met Sarani. Sarani is a princess in India, already in line for a throne. She had her own duties, and they are pushed apart because of their purpose in life. But years later, Sarani does end up having to flee her country because assassination issue, and she needs to flee for her safety. That is when she boards Ryston's ship, and he is, now a duke. He has his own grudges because of the things that happened in the past, but this is definitely a second chance romance. This does feature some dynamics in here that, again, I can't really say I enjoyed, but I'm not going to hold it to you. It's important to have representation in all genres, and I feel like historical romance is definitely lacking in that. So I still think this is worth reading just to see how it is now. And this is a fairly recent publishing, but again, you make your own opinions about it. And I did go on to read the next book. The next book in the series is Rules for Heiresses. I'll place it right here. But this follows Ravana and Cortland. Ravana is the younger sister of Ryston from the first book. She is very independent and seeks her own freedom, so she decides to flee London and goes to Antigua in disguise as a man. There she runs into Cortland again. Cortland was her betrothed in their youth, but when he was sent away and presumed dead, she never thought to see him again until, of course, they ran into each other and her identity was revealed. But also, Cortland is announced to be the new Duke following the death of his grandfather. His birth father did pass away already, so he was announced as the next in line. And this forces them to return to London, in addition to a marriage of convenience, because they are caught in a compromising position. This I did enjoy a little bit better than Princess Stakes, but again, I still think both books are worth reading if you want to dive into historical romances and want to diversify your reading. This author is definitely one to check out. So the next historical I'll be sharing is by Grace Calloway, and that is The Duke Who Knew Too Much. This follows Emma and Alaric. Now, Alaric is a known rake, so when Emma, an innocent, finds him in the garden with another woman, she can't help but assume the worst of him, that he is in fact forcing himself on her, but it is all a misunderstanding. So unfortunately, when Alaric is later caught with his mistress, who was poisoned, Emma can't help but point fingers at him, so Alaric has to convince her of his innocence. And of course, this shows the start of their relationship, having to figure out who the real murderer is and why they are doing so. So this was an interesting read. I will say I did enjoy this fairly well. I do plan on continuing with the series, but I have yet to do so. The last historical that I read before is by Sapna Bog, and this is Dare to Be a Duchess. I'll put it right here. This follows Tristan and Lara. Lara is half Indian and half English. Her parents already passed away from fever, and she is now the ward of Tristan's uncle. They've already known each other for years, and Lara is the best friend of Tristan's younger sister Anne. Tristan, also known as Wolf to his friends, tends to be more protective of his family and Lara by extension, but he always thought she was kind of the one who was troublesome for their family, and not because of her background, but just by being so independent and so open about things. But she was always bringing light into their lives, which he later figures out and comes to terms with. This follows their development as friends somewhat to lovers. There's also aspect of bigotry in here, as mentioned, some crime a little bit in there because of the climactic moment at the end. But in hindsight, I do think this was fairly enjoyable, and I do plan on continuing with the next book, which will be about Tristan's friends and his love interest. So that should be really good. Now, following all those recommendations, I will be talking about some of the books I do plan on reading, if not this month, later on, because that is essentially the point, to diversify your reading in general and, expand your horizons and all that good stuff. But I do have my physical stack right here with some books by Asian authors, as well as my own list on Hoopla. So the first book I'll be talking about is Once Upon a Sunset. This is by Tiff Marcello. So this book follows Diana, and she is a gynecologist in Washington, D.C. After her grandmother passes away, she experiences an issue at work, and because of that, she is forced to have a sabbatical. When her mother, Margot, moves back in with her, her mother's very free-spirited. They discover letters from Diana's grandfather, who was thought to have died in World War II. But of course, the letters show that he did survive, and they do, in fact, have extended family in the Philippines. So, this is them finding out more about their past and coming to terms with it, as well as rethinking their ideas about love. So, I thought this would be an interesting start into some Filipina romances. And, I'm probably going to find more fiction in this than romance, which I just assume based on the synopsis that I read about the book. But that is fine by me because, again, I'm just trying to go a little bit outside of my usual. So I'm looking forward to this one. Another book I'm looking forward to reading is Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Satano. This follows Madeline and her aunties. Essentially, Madeline is on a blind date when she accidentally kills him, and the aunties are called in to help get rid of the body. But this gives me darker rom-com vibes, and I'm all for it. I haven't been reading too much that are within the rom-com realm of romance, but I am hoping to enjoy this because the sequel did just come out, and it would be nice to, get invested in another universe. So there's that. Next, I'm going to be sharing Sweet on You by Carla de Guzman. This is a Filipino romance, and I am hoping to get into this, but I will say it looks like it's going to be more around Christmas time, following Sarai and Gabriel. Sarai is a barista and cafe owner, so when she realizes that there's going to be a baker next door, Gabriel, they have this impending rivalry, but of course it ensues, and love is in the air, as well as Christmas. So we'll see. Christmas is a big holiday in the Philippines, and they have Christmas lights up or as early as 4 months before Christmas. So I am excited to see some of that essence in here, and hopefully in the future go abroad to visit family and see what Christmas is like around that time. So who knows, but I'm not sure if I'm ready for Christmas, but I might just read it anyway because who doesn't want Christmas in the spring? I'm also hoping to get into Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I did enjoy the Hulu series of the same title. However, when I did try to read this last year, I got about 2 chapters in before I DNF'd it. I'm not sure if it was the mood I was in at the time, but just from the gist of the show, it seems like it's still going to follow the same premise of it being about two families in the suburbs, one more of middle class, the other one of lower class, with a single parent household. And I was drawn to this because the title is inherently clever. Based on the show, it seems like it's alluding to not just literal fires starting in the neighborhood, but also the metaphorical ones, talking about discussions of social politics, about race, about sexuality and acceptance. It was all packed into that show so nicely in, I believe it was only 8 episodes, and I'm hoping to get the same feeling out of the book. Again, I did try this before and I did not finish at the time, but since it was turned into a show, I assume it's also interesting here. So I'm hoping to enjoy it second go around, but we'll see. The last contemporary book I'm hoping to get to is by Jean Luen Yang. This is American Born Chinese. It is a graphic novel. I haven't really been reading from middle grade age that often, but I am hoping to diversify that because in the past, when I was in middle grade or early high school, this is all I had in my personal reading outside of school, and most of those weren't diverse because those weren't available yet. So I'm curious to see how they are doing it now and tackling these social issues for younger grade books. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. Now, on to the historical romances that I plan to read. The first one is by Courtney Milan, The Duke Who Didn't. I admit I started this last year, but I didn't finish. I only got about 100 pages in, but I didn't continue. And I'm not sure if it was the writing style or, again, the mood I was in at the time, so I'm going to give it another go. But this follows Jeremy and Chloe. Jeremy is a duke of mixed heritage, and he doesn't share his true identity to his friends, let alone Chloe, who he's always have been interested in, and they've always been interested in each other. Chloe is a couple years older than him, so that's sweet to have the female be older than the guy for once. But outside of that, Chloe is attempting to make this special sauce for her father's business because of his failing health. So this is supposed to be the process of that, along with their relationship and trying to make a list of all the things that Jeremy needs in a wife, but they all end up being qualities that Chloe has, and trying to make her see that she is the one that he wants. So that premise sounds good, but at the time I wasn't into it, so we're going to give it another go and then see if this is for me or not. Next book I have is by Royaline Singh, and that is Betting on a Duke's Heart. This is supposed to follow Arias and Dinah. Dinah is of mixed Indian heritage among the Ton, and she is hoping to marry someone who's actually going to value her and not so much her family's award-winning horses. Whereas Arias' goal is to acquire his father's dream to have those winning horses. So this is an arranged marriage situation. Other than that, I don't really know too much about it, but we'll see. And again, new to me author, so things to try. The next one I'm hoping to get to is To Covet a Countess by Sapna Bog. I did read her book Dare to be a Duchess, and I did mention that earlier in this video. But the second book follows Hawksley, or I should say Nicholas, but he's the Earl of Hawksley, and he is one of the elusive lords. He is nearly assassinated, but his assassin faints in his arms, and of course that ends up being Sanya, who is his Indian heritage love interest. So she fled India with her sister, and this is supposed to follow them. Of course, there's danger involved, and that's about all I know about this book. But again, I'm hoping to continue the series. Another historical that I'm hoping to get to is by Janine Lin, and that is Butterfly Swords. This looks like it's going to be taking place during the Tang Dynasty in China. And essentially, Ai Li is a princess who is betrayed and is forced to flee before her wedding. By doing so, she enlists the help of a warrior in Rhyme. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but essentially, they have their own interests together, and he intends to protect her because of her innocent nature. But of course, they fall for each other, and I'm looking forward to this. I haven't read this author before, so this could be interesting. And most historicals tend to take place within Scotland or England or America, but this will be new to me to actually take place in China. So that's a great. We need more of that in historicals for sure. The last book I'm hoping to get to would be by Sherry Thomas, and that is Beguiling the Beast. This is supposed to follow Venetia and her love interest in the Duke. At first, she is seeking out revenge against him, but when she attempts to do so, she falls in love with him. So, with that being said, I don't know what else is going to happen because I have yet to read this, but I am looking forward to it because that is a very interesting plot point. And that concludes all my picks for the 2022 Asian Readathon started by with Cindy. I will be linking her video announcement in the description box down below, along with other videos by booktubers talking about their recommendations to Asian authors. I will say some of them do overlap with mine, but that is okay. If you have your own recommendations, whether that be within the romance genre or something else, feel free to comment them down below. I would also like to implore you to take it a step further and not just consider the books that you're reading, but also consider the music that you listen to, the languages that you learn, the food that you eat, the movies that you watch. Personally, I gravitate towards Netflix Filipino movies. I'm able to pick up the language more for my mother's side of the family, as well as enjoy it with her, and she can listen to her native tongue. She is fluent in English and Tagalog, which is the national language in the Philippines, but we are able to watch it together, and I'm finally starting to really pick up the language. So, with that being said, paalam po to my fellow Filipinos, and till next time, thank you for watching. Take care.